Mr. Chen, this eyesore stops today. Patricia Kellerman stood at the edge of my driveway at 6 in the morning, waving a violation notice like a weapon. 24 hours to remove every non-compliant plant, or you're looking at daily fines starting at $50. I set down my watering can and studied her perfectly pressed blazer, then glanced at the emergency vehicle access she was blocking with her SUV. You realize you're parked in a fire lane, right? That's actually a code violation that could cost lives. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. Patricia's confident smirk faltered for just a second. She didn't know I'd spent 30 years as a fire marshal, or that I could spot safety violations from 50 yards away. I'm David Chen, and I've seen enough bureaucratic overreach to recognize when someone's drunk on a little power. The truth is, this wasn't about landscaping rules. Linda had planted every single flower in this garden during her chemotherapy treatments 2 years ago. The bright orange marigolds Patricia was pointing at dismissively, Linda chose those because they bloomed through winter, giving her something beautiful to look forward to during her darkest months. The decorative stones Patricia called non-compliant hardscaping were river rocks Linda collected on our weekend drives when she was too weak for long hikes but still craved nature. These plants have deep root systems, I said calmly, kneeling beside Linda's favorite butterfly bush. My wife researched native compatibility and drought resistance before every purchase. She was fighting cancer, and this garden gave her hope. I looked up at Patricia. What exactly makes hope non-compliant? Patricia shifted uncomfortably but doubled down. Community standards exist for property values. Your memorial affects everyone's investment. The way she said memorial, like it was something distasteful, told me everything I needed to know about her character. This woman would steamroll anyone who couldn't fight back, but she'd picked the wrong widower to intimidate. I notice your clubhouse renovation project has some interesting modifications, I mentioned casually, watching her reaction. Hope all the permits are in order. Her eyes narrowed. Everything was handled professionally. I'm sure it was. I stood slowly, brushing soil from my hands. Fire safety codes have gotten pretty strict lately. Lot of liability if something's not up to standard. Patricia stepped closer, trying to use her height advantage. Mr. Chen, I don't know what you think you're implying, but this HOA has operated within all regulations for 6 years under my leadership. Your garden violates Section 4.2 of the Community Covenant, and it will be removed. 30 years in fire safety teaches you to spot potential problems, I replied, my voice steady. Sometimes what looks compliant on paper isn't actually safe in practice. She thrust the violation notice toward me. 24 hours. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. As Patricia stalked back to her illegally parked SUV, I picked up Linda's old gardening journal and flipped through pages of her careful notes. Each entry was dated, documenting her hope that these plants would outlive her cancer. She'd written on the last page, David, promise me you'll keep growing beautiful things, even when I can't. I watched Patricia's taillights disappear around the corner and felt something shift inside me. She thought she was dealing with a grieving widower who'd roll over to avoid conflict. What she didn't realize was that grief had given me absolute clarity about what was worth fighting for. The morning sun hit Linda's marigolds, and they seemed to glow with defiant orange fire. Patricia Kellerman had just declared war on the wrong memorial garden. Where are you watching from? Because this HOA president just picked a fight with someone who spent 3 decades protecting people from dangerous situations. And she's about to learn that some battles choose their own warriors. That afternoon, I needed to clear my head after Patricia's morning ambush, so I walked down to the community pool where residents usually gathered on weekends. The sound of children's laughter should have been comforting, but instead, I found Patricia Kellerman standing over 78-year-old Mrs. Rodriguez like a predator circling wounded prey. This walker creates an unsightly obstruction, Patricia was saying, gesturing dismissively at Mrs. Rodriguez's mobility aid. Community areas must maintain aesthetic standards. You'll need to find alternative seating arrangements or face fines. Mrs. Rodriguez clutched her walker tighter, her voice barely a whisper. I need it to stand up. My hip replacement ... That's not the HOA's concern, Patricia cut her off. Personal medical equipment doesn't override community appearance standards. I felt my blood pressure spike. 30 years of emergency response had taught me to recognize vulnerable people in crisis, and Patricia was deliberately targeting someone who couldn't fight back. This wasn't about rules, it was about power. Mrs. Rodriguez, I said, approaching with what Linda used to call my calm firefighter voice. How are you feeling today? Patricia whirled around. Mr. Chen, this doesn't concern you. Actually, it does. I knelt beside Mrs. Rodriguez's chair, noting how Patricia had positioned herself to block the elderly woman's exit route. Emergency access requires clear pathways for mobility devices. That's not aesthetic preference, that's life safety. Patricia's jaw tightened. You seem very concerned with safety codes lately. Old habits. I helped Mrs. Rodriguez adjust her walker to a more comfortable position. Amazing how many safety issues you notice once. You know what to look for. As Patricia stalked away muttering about problem residents, I sat with Mrs. Rodriguez while she collected herself. Around the pool, I noticed other families quickly cleaning up children's toys when they saw Patricia approaching. A mother hurriedly stuffed pool noodles into a bag, while her husband whispered urgently about violation notices. She's gotten worse since the clubhouse project started, Mrs. Rodriguez confided, her voice shaky. Used to be strict but fair. Now it's like she's looking for reasons to punish people. I glanced toward the renovated clubhouse, noting how Patricia had positioned herself near the main entrance like she was guarding it. The renovation was expensive? $300,000, whispered Elena Santos, a single mother who'd overheard our conversation. She sat down carefully, keeping her voice low. Patricia insisted on premium finishes, said it would boost property values. But now she's nickel and diming everyone to make up the budget shortfall. Tommy Jenkins got fined for leaving his bicycle on his own porch, added another neighbor, Mark Stevens. Said it violated the clean sightline policy. That's a 10-year-old's bike we're talking about. I watched Patricia across the pool area, noting how she moved between families like a storm cloud, each interaction leaving residents looking deflated and anxious. This wasn't community leadership, it was systematic intimidation. People are afraid to say anything, Elena continued, glancing nervously toward Patricia. She's got supporters on the board who back her up, and the rest of us. We just try to stay under the radar. What about board meetings? I asked. Mark laughed bitterly. She controls the agenda. Resident concerns get pushed to the end, then she calls time limits. It's all theater. I studied the clubhouse structure more carefully, my trained eye automatically cataloging potential issues. The entrance modifications looked expensive, but oddly configured. Emergency egress seemed compromised by decorative features that hadn't been there before the renovation. Mr. Chen? Mrs. Rodriguez touched my arm. Thank you for standing up to her. Most people won't anymore. Everyone deserves dignity and safety, I replied. But my mind was racing. Patricia's pattern was becoming clear. She'd created a financial crisis with her vanity project, then started squeezing residents to compensate. But squeeze hard enough, and systems start to fail. As I walked home past the clubhouse, I noticed something that made my fire marshal instincts twitch. The new decorative barriers around the building looked beautiful, but they definitely altered the original emergency access design. Patricia Kellerman thought she was running a tight ship. What she'd actually created was a pressure cooker, and pressure cookers had a tendency to explode when someone who understood systems took a closer look. This was bigger than my garden. This was about protecting an entire community from someone who'd lost sight of what leadership actually meant. That evening, I walked to the community mailboxes thinking about what I'd witnessed at the pool, the systematic intimidation, the financial pressure from Patricia's expensive renovation, the way residents had learned to fear their own HOA president. I was sorting through bills when I heard footsteps approaching hesitantly behind me. David, could I have a word? I turned to find Marcus Thompson, the HOA treasurer, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a man standing on unstable ground. His usually confident demeanor had cracked, revealing someone wrestling with uncomfortable truths. Marcus? I nodded, noting how he kept glancing back toward Patricia's house 2 streets over. What's on your mind? He opened his mailbox with shaking hands, fumbling with keys that shouldn't have been difficult to manage. I wanted to apologize for this morning. Patricia's approach with your garden was aggressive. But necessary? I asked, watching his internal struggle play out across his face. Marcus's shoulders sagged. Community standards exist for a reason. Property values, neighborhood cohesion. His voice trailed off like he was reciting memorized talking points that had lost their conviction. You don't sound convinced. He pulled out a stack of mail, then immediately started shuffling through it nervously, not really seeing what he was holding. The board has to present a united front. Patricia's been president for 6 years, and she's effective. Effective at what, exactly? Marcus winced at my direct question. He set his mail down, then picked it up again, clearly torn between loyalty and growing moral discomfort. Look, I've seen the budget reports. The clubhouse renovation, it went over. Significantly. How significantly? He glanced around the empty mailbox area, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. 40,000 over budget. Patricia insisted on premium materials, custom fixtures, said it was an investment in community prestige. I processed this information while watching Marcus fidget with his car keys. So, now she's making up the shortfall through violation fines? I didn't say that, but his defensive tone suggested I'd hit the target. Marcus rubbed his forehead, looking genuinely pained. The board approved her financial recovery plan, stricter enforcement of existing rules, focused compliance initiatives. Targeting elderly residents and families with children? Marcus flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not... We don't target anyone specifically. Mrs. Rodriguez's walker, Tommy's bicycle, my wife's memorial garden. I kept my voice calm, but let each example land. What do these violations have in common, Marcus? He stared at his shoes, jaw working silently. When he finally looked up, I saw a man trapped between his conscience and his fear. Patricia says you're a troublemaker, that you're undermining community harmony. What do you say? The question hung in the evening air while Marcus wrestled with his answer. His hands clenched and unclenched around his keys, and I could practically see the internal battle between doing what was right and avoiding Patricia's wrath. I've been on this board for 3 years, he said finally. Patricia's always been strong-willed, but lately... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. The financial pressure is getting to her. She's making decisions without full board consultation. What kind of decisions? Marcus looked around again, paranoia evident in every gesture. The clubhouse contractor raised safety concerns during construction. Code compliance issues, emergency access problems. Patricia told him to proceed with the original plan to stay on budget. My fire marshal instincts went on high alert. She overruled safety recommendations. She said the contractor was padding costs with unnecessary upgrades. Marcus's voice dropped to almost a whisper. But David, I've seen some of those reports. They weren't padding. They were legitimate safety concerns. Do you still have copies of those reports? Marcus went pale. I can't. Patricia handles all contractor communications directly now. Says it streamlines the process. He backed toward his car like a man fleeing a crime scene. I shouldn't have told you this. Marcus, if there are real safety issues, I have to go. He was already walking away but turned back with obvious internal struggle. David, be careful. Patricia's feeling cornered about the budget, and cornered people make dangerous choices. As his taillights disappeared, I stood alone among the mailboxes processing what I'd learned. Marcus Thompson was caught between his conscience and his fear, but he'd just confirmed my growing suspicions about the clubhouse renovation. Patricia hadn't just created a financial crisis. She'd potentially created a safety crisis by ignoring professional recommendations to save money. The next morning, I found a certified letter in my mailbox that made Marcus's warning about Patricia feeling cornered look like an understatement. The official HOA letterhead couldn't disguise what was essentially a legal threat wrapped in bureaucratic language. Notice of formal violation hearing was printed in bold letters across the top, followed by 3 pages of dense text that seemed designed to intimidate rather than inform. Patricia had scheduled a board hearing for the following evening, complete with phrases like willful non-compliance, community covenant breach, and potential legal remedies, including liens and foreclosure proceedings. I was still processing the aggressive tone when Patricia's SUV pulled into my driveway, followed by a white pickup truck I didn't recognize. She emerged with a clipboard and a man in work clothes carrying a measuring tape. "Mr. Chen, this is Brad Stevens from Precision Landscaping," Patricia announced, her voice carrying the artificial authority of someone drunk on small-scale power. "He's here to document the extent of your violations for tomorrow's hearing." Brad looked uncomfortable as he began measuring Linda's flower beds. "Ma'am, these are just regular garden plants. Nothing unusual about the installation." "Measure everything," Patricia cut him off. "Non-compliant species, unauthorized hardscaping, improper border materials. I want documentation of every violation." I watched this theater of intimidation while my anger built steadily. Patricia was using community resources to wage personal warfare against a memorial garden, and she was dragging an innocent contractor into her vendetta. "Brad," I said calmly, "how long have you worked with the HOA?" "First time, actually," he replied, continuing his measurements with obvious reluctance. "Ms. Kellerman called yesterday, said it was urgent." Patricia stepped between us. "Mr. Chen, any interference with official HOA business will be noted in tomorrow's hearing record." "Official business?" I pulled out my phone and started recording. "You mean using association funds to harass residents who won't comply with your personal demands?" Her face flushed. "Your property values affect the entire community. When you ignore community standards, everyone's investment suffers." "Whose investment, Patricia?" "Because I've lived here 8 years, and property values were fine before you started your enforcement crusade." Brad finished his measurements and packed up quickly, clearly wanting to escape the tension. After he left, Patricia moved closer, lowering her voice to what she probably thought was a threatening whisper. "David, you don't understand how serious this is. The board has options you haven't considered: liens, legal fees, forced compliance through court order." She paused for effect. "Your late wife wouldn't want you to lose your home over a garden." The mention of Linda crossed a line I hadn't known existed. My voice stayed level, but something cold settled in my chest. My wife spent her final months creating something beautiful while fighting for her life. "What have you created lately, Patricia?" That evening, I discovered Patricia had posted on the community Facebook page, "Reminder: all residents must comply with community covenants. The board will not tolerate problem residents who think rules don't apply to them. Property values and community standards affect everyone. And accountability, and proper values, and community." The comments section was a battlefield. Patricia's supporters praised strong leadership and necessary enforcement, while others hinted at their own struggles with increasingly aggressive HOA demands. Elena Santos had liked several comments criticizing Patricia's methods, which took courage given her vulnerable position as a single mother. As I read through the digital pile-on, I realized Patricia wasn't just targeting me. She was using my situation to send a message to the entire community: comply or face public humiliation and financial consequences. The formal hearing notice sat on my kitchen table, its legal language designed to make resistance seem hopeless. But 30 years in emergency services had taught me that bullies relied on intimidation because they lacked real authority. Patricia Kellerman thought she was tightening her grip on the community. What she'd actually done was give me a detailed look at her tactics, her supporters, and her pressure points. Tomorrow's hearing would be interesting. The following evening, I decided to walk off my pre-hearing nerves by taking a route past the renovated clubhouse. Linda and I used to walk this path together during her treatment, when movement helped manage her pain and the fresh air gave her strength for the next day's fight. As I approached the building, my trained eye immediately caught details that civilian residents would miss. The decorative landscaping looked impressive, but it had fundamentally altered the original emergency access design. What should have been clear egress paths were now blocked by ornamental barriers and raised planters. I moved closer, using my phone's flashlight to examine the main entrance. The original double doors had been replaced with a single wider door, flanked by decorative glass panels. Aesthetically pleasing, but the exit capacity had been reduced by at least 30%. In an emergency evacuation, That bottleneck could cost lives. The side entrance told an even more troubling story. The emergency exit that should have provided secondary egress was now partially blocked by an elaborate fountain feature. Patricia's premium finishes had created a death trap disguised as community enhancement. Through the main windows, I could see the interior renovations. The emergency lighting system appeared incomplete. Several exit signs were missing or improperly positioned. Worse, the electrical conduits running along the ceiling were routed in ways that violated basic fire safety codes. Any electrical fire would spread rapidly through those pathways instead of being contained. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena Santos. "David, saw Patricia's car at the clubhouse an hour ago. She looked stressed. Be careful at the hearing." I studied the building's exterior more systematically, documenting everything with photos. The fire department connection for emergency responders had been relocated during renovation, but the new position would make it nearly impossible for ladder trucks to establish proper access. Someone had prioritized aesthetics over functionality at every decision point. This wasn't just poor planning. This was willful negligence. Marcus had mentioned that Patricia overruled contractor safety recommendations to stay on budget. Now I was seeing the results of those decisions, and they were potentially catastrophic. The electrical meter housing had been moved to accommodate the new landscaping, but the installation looked substandard. Exposed connections, inadequate weatherproofing, improper grounding. A fire marshal would red tag this installation immediately. As I circled the building, cataloging violation after violation, I felt the familiar clarity that came with understanding a complex emergency situation. Patricia had created exactly the kind of hazardous environment that my career had been dedicated to preventing. The irony was perfect. While Patricia harassed residents about garden aesthetics and bicycle placement, she'd created genuine safety hazards that threatened every person who entered this building. The woman obsessed with community standards had authorized construction that violated the most basic standards of all, those designed to keep people alive. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Captain Martinez at the city fire department. We'd worked together for 15 years before my retirement, and he'd trust my professional assessment. But calling him would mean escalating beyond HOA politics into official regulatory action. Standing in the shadow of Patricia's vanity project, I thought about Mrs. Rodriguez struggling with her walker, while Patricia demanded aesthetic compliance. I thought about Tommy Jenkins losing his bicycle privileges, while Patricia ignored electrical hazards that could burn down the clubhouse. The hearing notice in my pocket suddenly felt less threatening. Patricia could throw around legal language and violation fines all she wanted, but she'd made a critical error. She'd launched a war against someone who could see exactly what she'd been hiding behind her decorative facades. My phone camera had documented enough code violations to shut down the clubhouse immediately. The question was whether I wanted to use this nuclear option or save it for when Patricia's aggression inevitably escalated further. Looking at Linda's memorial garden, visible in the distance, I made my decision. Patricia had chosen to make this personal by threatening something sacred. Now, she was about to learn that some battles reveal more than the combatants intended. The community deserved to know what their HOA president had built with their money and what it might cost them if those chickens ever came home to roost. The hearing was scheduled for 8 p.m., but Patricia Kellerman arrived at my front door at 11:47 p.m. like some sort of deranged debt collector. I know the exact time because my security camera captured everything: the aggressive pounding, the shouted demands, and what happened next. "David Chen, open this door right now." Her voice carried across the sleeping neighborhood like a siren. "We need to discuss your compliance immediately." I checked the camera feed from my bedroom, seeing Patricia's face twisted with an anger that seemed way out of proportion to a landscaping dispute. This wasn't professional HOA business. This was personal vendetta played out at midnight like some twisted power trip. When I didn't immediately respond, she escalated, first more pounding, then kicking the door hard enough to rattle the frame. The security camera caught her face clearly as she delivered 3 solid kicks to my front door, her expensive heels scraping paint and leaving visible damage. "I know you're in there. This non-compliance ends tonight." I finally opened the door, keeping the chain latch engaged. "Patricia, it's almost midnight. What's so urgent it couldn't wait for the hearing?" You think you're clever, don't you? Her eyes had a wild quality I'd seen in people push beyond rational thought. Asking questions, recording conversations, making trouble for people just trying to maintain community standards. I'm trying to preserve my wife's memorial garden. Your wife is dead, David? The words hit like physical blows. This community is for the living, and the living have rules. That's when something shifted inside me. The grief I'd been carrying, the respectful compliance I'd shown to bureaucratic process, the benefit of doubt I'd given to community leadership, all of it crystallized into cold, professional clarity. Get off my property, Patricia. Or what? You'll call the police? Tell them the HOA president came to discuss community compliance? She laughed, but it sounded unhinged. Good luck with that. I closed the door and called 911 anyway. Property damage, disturbing the peace, and honestly, I was concerned about Patricia's mental state. Someone that unstable shouldn't be making decisions affecting an entire community. After the police left with Patricia's information and my security footage, I stood in Linda's garden under the stars, processing what I'd witnessed. This wasn't about landscaping rules or community standards. This was about someone who'd tasted power and lost all sense of proportion. The moonlight illuminated Linda's marigolds, still blooming bright orange despite Patricia's threats. Linda had planted them during chemotherapy because they represented resilience, flowers that thrived even in the harsh conditions. Standing among them, I felt her strength flowing through me. Patricia's midnight visit had revealed something crucial. She was spiraling. The financial pressure from the clubhouse overrun, the resistance from residents, the growing questions about her leadership, all of it was pushing her toward increasingly desperate actions. But her desperation had made her sloppy. The security footage would document her instability, and her threats would be impossible to deny. More importantly, her focus on intimidating me had blinded her to the real vulnerability I'd discovered. The clubhouse violations weren't going anywhere. Every day that building remained occupied was another day of liability Patricia couldn't afford to acknowledge. She'd spent community funds creating a death trap, then tried to recoup the losses by terrorizing residents over trivial violations. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Captain Martinez's contact information. Tomorrow, Patricia would expect me to show up at her hearing as a defeated homeowner, ready to cave under legal pressure and community embarrassment. Instead, she was about to learn that grief had given me absolute clarity about what was worth fighting for, and professional expertise had given me the tools to fight back. Linda's garden would stay exactly where it was, but Patricia's reign of bureaucratic terror was about to end in a way she never saw coming. Some battles choose their own warriors, and Patricia Kellerman had just discovered she'd chosen the wrong one. The next evening, I was reviewing the security footage from Patricia's midnight visit when I heard a hesitant knock at my kitchen door. Through the window, I could see Marcus Thompson standing in my backyard, clutching a manila folder against his chest like armor. Marcus? I opened the door, noting how he kept glancing over his shoulder toward the street. Everything okay? Can I come in? I need to show you something, but... He paused, swallowing hard. If Patricia finds out I'm here, she'll destroy me. I led him to my kitchen table, where Linda's old coffee mug still sat in its usual spot. Marcus noticed it immediately, his expression softening with what looked like genuine remorse. I heard about last night, he said quietly. The police visit, Patricia's... He struggled for words. That wasn't leadership. That was someone losing control. She mentioned you might have security footage. Marcus nodded, setting the folder on the table, but keeping his hands pressed flat against it. Elena Santos called me. She saw Patricia's car leaving your street after midnight, and she was worried about escalation. Escalation? David, I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand how dangerous this is for me. Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Patricia's been making decisions without board approval. Financial decisions, contractor agreements, safety modifications. He opened the folder with trembling fingers, revealing a stack of documents that looked like correspondence and financial reports. These are copies of the original contractor recommendations for the clubhouse renovation, the ones Patricia said were cost padding. I studied the top document, A professional assessment from Morrison Construction detailing required safety upgrades, fire suppression systems, emergency lighting, proper egress paths. Each recommendation was marked with estimated costs and code compliance references. Patricia told the board these were unnecessary expenses, Marcus continued. She said Morrison was trying to inflate the contract with premium features we didn't need. But these aren't premium features. I flipped through pages of legitimate safety requirements. These are basic life safety systems. I know that now. Marcus pulled out another document, a revised contract with most safety items marked as deferred or eliminated. She negotiated directly with Morrison's project manager, bypassing their safety supervisor. The board never saw the final modification agreements. I felt my professional instincts kicking into high gear. Marcus, this is documented negligence. If someone gets hurt in that building, there's more. He produced a series of email printouts. Morrison's safety supervisor sent multiple warnings about the modifications. Patricia responded by threatening to hire a different contractor if they didn't proceed with her version. The emails painted a damning picture. Professional contractors raising legitimate safety concerns, Patricia dismissing them as profit-motivated obstacles, and a clear paper trail of her overruling expert recommendations to save money. Why are you showing me this now? Marcus's composure finally cracked. Because I can't sleep at night, knowing what we approved without proper information. Because Mrs. Rodriguez shouldn't have to defend using a walker while Patricia ignores fire hazards. Because ... He paused, his voice breaking slightly. Because my daughter's scout troop meets in that clubhouse every Thursday. The weight of personal stakes transformed Marcus from conflicted board member to terrified father. If there's a fire, if someone gets trapped because of those blocked exits, I'm partially responsible. We all are. Not if you were deceived about the safety implications. Patricia's been handling all contractor communications personally since the overrun, Marcus explained. She said it would streamline the process. But really, she was cutting the board out of safety discussions we should have been part of. I studied the documentation, emails, contracts, safety assessments, financial records. This wasn't just evidence of poor judgment. It was proof of deliberate deception that had created genuine hazards. Marcus, I need to ask you something directly. Are you prepared to support this information if it becomes part of an official investigation? He went pale, but nodded slowly. My daughter's safety is more important than Patricia's retaliation. But David, she's going to come after both of us when this gets out. Let her come, I replied, thinking about Linda's marigolds blooming despite every obstacle. Some fights are worth having. The next morning, I drove to the city fire department with Marcus's documents and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since Linda's diagnosis. Captain Martinez greeted me in his office like the old colleague I was, but his expression grew serious when I explained why I'd come. David, you're talking about a formal investigation into HOA construction practices, he said, reviewing the contractor emails Marcus had provided. This isn't neighbor disputes anymore. This is potential criminal negligence. I know exactly what this is, Tony. I spread the Morrison construction safety assessments across his desk. Look at these recommendations, then tell me what you see. Captain Martinez studied the documents with the methodical attention of someone who'd investigated too many preventable tragedies. Basic life safety systems, emergency egress, fire suppression, proper electrical installation. He looked up sharply. These weren't implemented? Patricia Kellerman overruled every recommendation to stay under budget. The contractor documented their objections, but she threatened to hire someone else if they didn't proceed with her modifications. Jesus, David. He pulled out the construction permits on file with the city. These plans don't match what you're describing. According to our records, all safety systems were included in the approved renovation. I felt the pieces clicking together. She submitted outdated plans to get permit approval, then modified the actual construction to cut costs. The city approved one version, while she built something completely different. Captain Martinez was already reaching for his phone. If that's accurate, we're looking at permit fraud in addition to safety violations. The building could be occupied illegally. Tony, I need to inspect that clubhouse officially. My certification's still active, and I have documented cause for safety concerns. He nodded grimly. I'll provide backup certification for your inspection. But David, once we trigger an official investigation, there's no going back. The HOA, the contractors, everyone involved gets scrutinized. Good. Patricia's been terrorizing residents while hiding genuine hazards that could kill people. Someone needs to hold her accountable. Captain Martinez pulled out the official inspection request forms. Walk me through your assessment process. I want this bulletproof when it hits Patricia's lawyer. For the next hour, we developed a systematic approach to documenting every violation. Emergency egress capacity, fire suppression systems, electrical code compliance, emergency lighting, exit signage. Each area would be photographed, measured, and assessed against current fire safety standards. I'll coordinate with the building inspector's office, Captain Martinez said. If the construction doesn't match approved plans, that's their jurisdiction too. What about timing? How soon can you complete your inspection? I thought about Patricia's escalating behavior, Marcus's courage in providing evidence, and the residents who had no idea they were gathering in a potential death trap. Tomorrow, I want to inspect while the building's empty, then file the official report immediately. That fast? Tony, Patricia's been using HOA meetings as power displays to intimidate residents. If we're going to expose what she's built, we should do it when the whole community can see the results. Captain Martinez grinned, the same expression he'd worn when we'd successfully prosecuted negligent landlords who'd endangered their tenants. You want to time the investigation to coincide with maximum community impact. I want to time it so Patricia can't spin this as personal vendetta or neighbor disputes. When city inspectors show up with violation notices, everyone will understand this isn't about my garden. It's about her putting people at risk to save money. He stamped the official inspection authorization. David, I've missed working with you. You always did think 3 moves ahead. Patricia's been playing checkers with people's lives. Time to show her what chess looks like. As I left the fire department with official inspection authority and backup from the city, I felt Linda's presence more strongly than I had since her death. She'd always said my job was protecting people, and retirement didn't change that calling. Patricia Kellerman thought she'd been fighting a grieving widower over garden rules. Tomorrow, she'd discover she'd actually been fighting a fire marshal who'd spent 30 years exposing exactly the kind of dangerous negligence she'd been hiding. The community deserved better leadership than someone who'd risk their safety for budget savings. By tomorrow evening, they'd have the documentation to demand it. The next morning, I met Bob Kim at the clubhouse with official inspection credentials and a professional camera. Bob had spent 40 years in construction before retirement, and his trained eye would catch details that even my fire safety expertise might miss. David, I've been curious about this renovation since they finished, Bob said as we approached the building. From the outside, the modifications looked expensive but oddly configured. I unlocked the clubhouse using the master key Marcus had provided, explaining that his daughter's scout troop would be meeting here Thursday evening. Bob's expression darkened as we stepped inside, and he saw the interior layout. Christ, they butchered the emergency egress. He pointed to where the original double exit doors had been replaced with a single wide door, flanked by decorative glass panels. That bottleneck reduces evacuation capacity by at least 40%. I photographed the modified entrance while dictating notes into my phone. Fire marshal inspection, Willowbrook Heights Clubhouse. Original egress capacity compromised by aesthetic modifications, prioritizing appearance over safety. We moved systematically through the building, documenting violation after violation. The emergency lighting system was incomplete. Several exit signs were missing entirely, while others were positioned too low or blocked by decorative elements. Any emergency evacuation would become a death trap in darkness. "Look at this electrical work," Bob called from the main meeting room. He'd removed a ceiling panel to examine the wiring installation. Whoever did this ignored basic code requirements. These conduits aren't properly secured, and the routing creates fire spread pathways instead of containment. I climbed up to examine the electrical installation, photographing junction boxes that weren't properly enclosed and wiring that violated every fire safety standard I'd learned in 30 years. This isn't just substandard work, this is dangerous, Any electrical fire would spread through the entire ceiling space within minutes. Gets worse, Bob said, pointing toward the rear of the building. The secondary exit's been compromised by that fountain installation. Emergency responders couldn't establish proper access, and evacuees would bottleneck trying to get around those decorative barriers. We spent 3 hours systematically documenting every safety violation, creating a comprehensive record that would be impossible for Patricia to dismiss or explain away. Fire suppression systems were missing from areas that clearly required them. Emergency lighting was inadequate or improperly positioned. Exit routes were blocked or reduced beyond safe capacity. "David, how did this pass any inspections?" Bob asked as we prepared to leave. "It didn't. Patricia submitted outdated plans to get city approval, then modified the actual construction without proper permits or inspections." "That's fraud." "That's exactly what it is." As we locked up the clubhouse, I noticed Elena Santos approaching with her daughter and 2 other neighborhood children. Thursday scout meeting. Exactly what Marcus had been worried about. "Mr. Chen, is everything okay with the clubhouse?" Elena looked concerned, seeing our official inspection equipment. "Just routine safety checks," I replied, not wanting to alarm the children. "Elena, could you walk with me for a moment?" I explained quietly that we'd discovered some safety issues that needed immediate attention, and that Thursday's meeting should probably be moved to someone's home until the problems were resolved. "How serious are we talking?" Elena asked, her mother's instincts clearly on high alert. "Serious enough that I wouldn't want my family in that building until the issues are fixed." Elena nodded grimly. "Patricia's been pushing so hard about rule enforcement, but she's been cutting corners on things that actually matter. Spread the word quietly. Any community events scheduled for the clubhouse should be moved until further notice. Don't make it about politics or HOA disputes. Just say there are safety concerns being addressed." That evening, I prepared my official fire marshal report, attaching Bob's construction assessment and all the photographs we'd taken. The document was thorough, professional, and damning. Patricia's cost-cutting decisions had created multiple life-threatening conditions that violated basic fire safety codes. But the most important part wasn't the technical violations. It was the pattern of decision-making the evidence revealed. Patricia had systematically chosen aesthetics over safety, budget savings over code compliance, and personal authority over professional expertise. Tomorrow's HOA board meeting was going to be very different from what Patricia expected. Instead of defending my garden against her bureaucratic harassment, I'd be presenting evidence that her leadership had endangered every person who entered that clubhouse. The community deserved to know what their HOA president had built with their money and what it might cost them if those safety hazards were ever put to the test. Early Thursday morning, I walked into City Hall carrying my comprehensive inspection report and a determination that had been building since Patricia's midnight visit. The building department receptionist recognized me from my years as fire marshal and waved me toward the inspector's office. "David Chen to file formal safety violation complaints," I announced to Inspector Williams, setting my documentation on his desk. "Multiple life-threatening code violations at a recently renovated community building." Inspector Williams reviewed my credentials and began examining the evidence: photographs, technical assessments, contractor correspondence, and the smoking gun of Patricia's permit fraud. His expression grew increasingly serious as he processed the scope of violations. "These are significant safety hazards," he said finally. "If your assessment is accurate, this building shouldn't be occupied until major remediation is completed." My assessment is thorough and professionally documented. The HOA president overruled contractor safety recommendations to stay under budget, then submitted outdated plans to circumvent proper inspection requirements. "When's the next community event scheduled for this building?" "Tonight. HOA board meeting at 7 p.m., with full community attendance expected." Inspector Williams reached for his phone. "I'm scheduling an emergency inspection for this afternoon. If we confirm these violations, we'll issue immediate occupancy restrictions and stop work orders." "Inspector, I need to request specific timing for that inspection." I pulled out my phone, showing him the HOA meeting agenda Patricia had posted on the community Facebook page. The board president has been using these meetings to intimidate residents who question her authority. If we're going to expose dangerous construction practices, Maximum community witness would ensure transparency. He studied the meeting announcement, noting Patricia's language about addressing problem residents and enforcing community compliance. You want the inspection results delivered during the HOA meeting itself? I want the community to understand that real leadership means protecting people, not threatening them. Patricia's been harassing residents about trivial violations while ignoring genuine safety hazards that could kill their families. Inspector Williams nodded slowly. Official inspection at 4 p.m. Results delivered during the 7 p.m. board meeting. That gives us time for thorough assessment and proper documentation. Perfect timing. David, you understand this will create significant disruption for the HOA, construction remediation, potential legal liability, board accountability issues. Good. Patricia's been disrupting people's lives with aggressive enforcement of petty rules while hiding the fact that she's endangered the entire community. Time for some accountability that actually matters. I left City Hall with official inspection scheduled and violation complaints filed through proper channels. This wasn't personal vendetta or neighbor dispute anymore. This was professional fire safety expertise, exposing genuine negligence that threatened lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Patricia's been calling board members all morning. She's planning to make tonight's meeting about your disruptive behavior and community compliance. She has no idea what's coming. Perfect. Patricia would spend the meeting trying to shame me for defending Linda's garden, right up until city inspectors arrived with evidence of her own dangerous rule-breaking. I drove past the clubhouse one final time, noting the decorative features that had been prioritized over safety systems. Tonight, the community would learn what their HOA president had really built with their money and what those aesthetic choices might have cost them in an emergency. Linda's memorial garden visible in the distance reminded me why this fight mattered. She'd spent her final months creating beauty and hope despite impossible circumstances. Patricia had spent her tenure creating fear and division while hiding genuine dangers. By evening, the community would know the difference between real leadership and bureaucratic bullying. They'd understand that some rules exist to protect people, while others exist to protect power. Patricia Kellerman had picked the wrong memorial garden to threaten, and she was about to learn that some battles reveal more about the combatants than they intended. The reckoning she'd been building toward with her midnight visits and harassment campaigns was finally here. And unlike her intimidation tactics, this confrontation would be backed by professional expertise, official authority, and documented evidence she couldn't dismiss or explain away. The community center was packed beyond capacity when I arrived at 6:45 p.m., with residents filling every chair and lining the walls. Patricia had clearly mobilized her supporters for what she expected to be my public humiliation, but the crowd included faces I recognized from my poolside conversations, people who'd been quietly suffering under her increasingly aggressive enforcement. Patricia sat at the head table, flanked by 2 board members, a stack of violation notices and legal documents arranged before her like weapons. She wore her most authoritative blazer and had positioned herself directly under the brightest lights, clearly planning to dominate the evening's proceedings. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia began at exactly 7 p.m., her voice carrying across the packed room. "Tonight we address a serious issue of community compliance and resident accountability. Mr. David Chen has repeatedly violated our landscaping covenants and has now begun undermining board authority through harassment and intimidation tactics." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Patricia launched into a prepared speech about property values, community standards, and the importance of uniform compliance. She painted my defense of Linda's garden as selfish disregard for neighborhood harmony. Mr. Chen's memorial garden, while emotionally significant to him, creates a precedent that threatens our entire covenant structure. Patricia continued, gesturing toward a PowerPoint presentation showing photos of my wife's flowers. "If we allow personal sentiment to override community rules, we'll have chaos within months." I sat quietly in the front row, checking my phone. Inspector Williams had texted, "En route with results." Significant violations confirmed. Patricia was building toward her climax, her voice rising with righteous authority. "The board has prepared legal remedies for Mr. Chen's non-compliance, including daily fines, lien procedures, and potential foreclosure action if necessary. Community standards must be. The community center doors opened with official authority that cut through Patricia's speech like a knife. Inspector Williams entered flanked by Captain Martinez and 2 additional city officials, all carrying clipboards, cameras, and official documentation that commanded immediate attention. "Excuse me," Inspector Williams announced, his voice carrying the weight of municipal authority. "I'm Building Inspector Williams with the City of Millbrook. We need to speak with HOA President Patricia Kellerman regarding urgent safety violations at your clubhouse facility." The room fell silent as Patricia's confident presentation collapsed into visible confusion. This is a private HOA meeting. City business should be scheduled through proper channels." "Ma'am, emergency safety violations don't wait for scheduling convenience," Captain Martinez replied, setting a thick folder on the head table. "We've completed inspection of your recently renovated clubhouse and identified multiple life-threatening code violations that require immediate remediation." Patricia's face went pale. "There must be some mistake. Our renovation was completed by licensed contractors with all proper permits." "Actually, that's part of the problem," Inspector Williams interrupted, opening his documentation. "The construction plans you submitted for permit approval don't match the actual building modifications. That constitutes permit fraud in addition to the safety violations." I stood slowly, feeling the room's attention shift toward me. "Inspector Williams, would it be helpful if I provided the professional fire safety assessment that initiated your investigation? You're the certified fire marshal who filed the original complaint?" "Retired Fire Marshal David Chen, 30 years of service, current inspection certification." I pulled out my own documentation. I identified the safety violations during routine observation and filed formal complaints through proper regulatory channels. The community was witnessing Patricia's authority crumble in real time. Her legal threats against my garden looked petty and vindictive compared to her documented negligence with actual safety systems. "The emergency egress capacity has been reduced by 40%, I explained to the stunned crowd. "Fire suppression systems were eliminated to save money. Emergency lighting is inadequate or missing entirely. Anyone trapped in that building during an emergency would face life-threatening hazards." Patricia tried desperately to regain control. "This is clearly retaliation for Mr. Chen's violation proceedings. He's using his connections to harass the board because he doesn't want to follow landscaping rules." "Ma'am," Captain Martinez replied coldly, "professional fire safety assessments aren't retaliation. They're protection for community members who've been unknowingly endangered by substandard construction practices." The room erupted in concerned conversations as residents realized their children's scout meetings, community events, and board gatherings had been taking place in a building that violated basic safety codes. Marcus Thompson found his voice at last. "Patricia, you told us the contractor safety recommendations were unnecessary expenses. You said they were trying to inflate costs with premium features. Those were business decisions made in the community's financial interest. Those were negligent decisions that could have killed people," I replied quietly, my professional authority now fully visible to everyone present. "And every document proving it will be part of the official investigation." 3 weeks later, I was watering Linda's marigolds in the early morning sun when Elena Santos approached with her daughter and a small group of neighbors carrying coffee cups and what looked like a handmade sign. "David, we wanted to thank you properly," Elena said, her voice carrying none of the fear that had characterized our previous conversations. "And we brought something special." The sign read, "Linda's Memorial Garden, a place of beauty, hope, and community strength," in elegant script, with smaller text explaining that the garden honored both Linda's memory and the principle that love creates more beauty than rules ever could. "The new board voted unanimously to make this official," Marcus explained, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him since this whole ordeal began. "Community memorial gardens are now explicitly protected in our revised covenants." Patricia's resignation had come within 48 hours of the inspection results, along with a terse statement about pursuing other opportunities. The city's investigation revealed permit fraud, willful safety violations, and financial mismanagement that exposed the HOA to massive liability. Her lawyer had advised immediate resignation to limit personal legal exposure. What's the latest on the clubhouse remediation? I asked. $80,000 to bring it up to code, Marcus replied. But our insurance is covering most of it since Patricia's actions violated our policy terms. The community actually benefits from having a truly safe facility instead of Patricia's death trap disguised as premium renovation. Mrs. Rodriguez approached slowly with her walker, moving with more confidence than I'd seen since Patricia's harassment began. Mr. Chen, my granddaughter's scout troop wants to plant flowers around your memorial garden. Would that be appropriate? Linda would love that, I replied, imagining my wife's joy at children creating beauty alongside her carefully chosen plants. She always said gardens grow better when they're tended by people who understand their purpose. Bob Kim joined our growing circle, carrying his own coffee and wearing a satisfied expression. David, the new board, asked me to oversee the clubhouse repairs. We're not just fixing Patricia's mistakes, we're upgrading beyond minimum code requirements, emergency lighting, improved egress, proper fire suppression throughout. Community investment in actual safety instead of cosmetic intimidation, I observed. Exactly. And the contractor's donating labor for your memorial garden sign installation. Says it's the least he can do after watching Patricia terrorize residents while hiding genuine hazards. As our informal gathering grew, I noticed something that hadn't existed during Patricia's reign. Neighbors talking openly without fear of retaliation. Children playing without parents nervously watching for violation notices. Community members discussing actual improvements instead of rule enforcement. You know what the best part is? Elena said, watching her daughter examine Linda's butterfly bush with scientific curiosity. My kids aren't afraid of the HOA anymore. They see it as something that should help the community, not threaten it. That afternoon, the community held an impromptu celebration in Linda's garden. Someone brought speakers for music, others contributed food, and families gathered around the flowers my wife had planted during her final months of life. The marigolds she'd chosen for their resilience became the centerpiece of a community that had rediscovered its own strength. Standing among neighbors who now understood what Linda's garden represented, I felt her presence more clearly than I had since her death. She'd taught me that love creates beauty that endures beyond any temporary authority, and that sometimes protecting what matters most requires standing up to people who mistake power for leadership. Thank you for fighting for all of us, Marcus said quietly as the celebration continued around us. Patricia was terrorizing the entire community, but you were the one with the courage and expertise to stop her. Linda's garden taught me that some things are worth preserving, I replied, watching children play among flowers that had survived both cancer treatments and bureaucratic harassment. Community should nurture growth, not suppress it. The evening sun illuminated Linda's marigolds, still blooming bright orange despite every obstacle they'd faced. In their resilience, I saw the lesson my wife had left behind. Love creates beauty that no amount of petty authority can destroy, and sometimes the greatest memorial we can offer those we've lost is protecting others from the kind of fear and intimidation that diminishes human dignity. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.